Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on training the metaverse. This is very interesting topic, and especially for us this is very important. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, we are developing many business incubators in South Asia, and our new generation, our youth community, we are engaging with millions of youth community in South Asia Pacific. They are really interested about metaverse, they are interested about digitalization, so we are bringing all of the modern science, engineering and technology oriented topic and world famous speakers to educate our new generations and develop a new society based on knowledge. So today we have another new episode. So first I would like to request Mr. Eric.
Well, the metaverse contains so many components that we think of every day. The infrastructure stuff, servers, blockchains. Um, so there's the infrastructure layer that people need to be trained on. Then there's the economic layer, and the way the people look at value is different. So value is no longer how many dollars or euros or yen. It's more like what do you have to give me versus what do I get? Because the utility of value that can be exchanged in the metaverse can be so different, because it could be, VIP privileges at the World Talent Economic Forum lab or incubator. So, for the next year, for the next lifetime. So training people how to think differently is probably the biggest thing. Is we need to train people on how to think of value and utility. So how do we determine what we value? How do we reward it? How do you exchange value? Because you can capture anything as value in the package it and deliver it. For example, Lisa was just telling us she's drinking Jittery coffee, which has NFTs attached. So now the value of the coffee can be beyond just a cup of coffee. You can even do status and reputation and connections. So, the hardest thing to do is teach people to think or behave differently, even if it's a little bit. And so you've got this technical layer. We just talked about the economic layer, but it's really the social layer which takes the most work. When I got in the game, everybody thought it's all about sharing data. We worked really hard to share data. Then somebody said, well, it's not just the data, it's the information. We created this World Wide Web thing together, and all of a sudden it's not just the information, but how do you get it? What does it mean? And then we move from them to say, well, it's not just the information, it's the capability. So now you can go online and run my software from your phone, basically. So we came into the cloud, and now what we're really doing is we're talking about community building. So the way to build communities, bring people together so they can access all these wonderful things in the metaverse is way different than what we're thinking. And I think Lisa will talk about being a community experience designer. Who's heard of that before? I think Lisa had to make up that phrase, because nobody was saying, nobody was even talking about communities. They're talking about markets and customers, and someone said, no, it's communities. In the business equivalent, we talk about stakeholders. It's not just the owners, the managers. You have to think about every piece of that, anybody who's going to use it, see it, and put it together. So I think probably the biggest training right now is just how do we teach people to think about value different and think about communities, like the World Talent Economic Forum. We can grow this into an incubator and a lab and a development function and a business. We can help people make money. So, we tend to take something new and think about it. When mobile phones came out, we thought, oh, it's just like a phone. And how many are treating this phone like they treated the old phones? Nobody. Very few people, unless you're really old, use a phone just to make a call. So thinking differently is a big thing. And so that is what we need to train people on, besides the basic stuff. But the other part of it is how you train people. And that training is way different. people today are looking for a shortcut for a transformation. I want to do things. And so when you train people to do things, it's less of a desire to go to a 4 years and get a degree or 2 years an advanced degree. It's more of how do you train me to create this value and put it out so everybody can get it? How do you build a community? How do you connect this with that? And so this idea of hybrid training, online, virtual, connected, asynchronous, you can come anytime, synchronous, we do it together. So now when you do training, there's all these little sliders. It used to be training was here's a template, build your own course, put it online, used to be easy. But now to train people, it's, well, how do you need to be trained? And so it's a hybrid approach that's different for almost everything you train. It's less of the ability to say, here's a template, just put your content on it, let's go. The way we train, especially I'm sure David will be talking about simulation and things like that. The way you train, what is a course like? It's a different set of experiences in a different way that's different for each type of thing we're trying to train people to. So what we're training to, I think, is to think and act differently. And I think the way we're training them is radically different also. And getting a few people to think or behave slightly differently is always challenging.
Okay. Thank you. Madam Lisa.
Well, that was a lot. I'll echo a bit of what I said last time we gathered, but in this context, I think training as a term may become better known with creating knowledge layers of information akin to content as a concept, but more for AI to help us in the future. And what was formerly known as training, or what I'll call designing experiences for people, perhaps, is more going to be about people sharing information. And the way that information is consumed will be designed through experiences that are less about consuming and testing and more about playing together. Now, I'm not a certified educator per se, but I've been hanging out in Zoom calls with people as they've been learning about the metaverse. So I may not be qualified to teach in the old traditional ways, but I am very qualified to show up and share information with other people as I am now. And it's opinion and experience and ideas for gathering of knowledge layers in some cases. But when faced with that question about how can we welcome people, it was my choice to create workshops, right? And so at workshop.games, we're inviting people to sit in calls kind of like this, but to share information about the various aspects they're encountering in the metaverse, such as what is a blockchain game? What is a wallet? How do I play, whatever game? And this is what people understand. Sure, they can read things, they can watch videos, but I know I learned and got involved more by people helping me and explaining things in ways and dealing with my repeated silly questions sometimes. So I think it's going to be more a surprise, community focused. And community experience designer really emerged. It's by asking people, being with people, seeing what people were needing, learning what I was needing as I'm doing things. Let's say I'm creating NFT, what kinds of questions, what kinds of things do I need? People creating games, what kinds of questions do they have? How to attract new players. Okay, new players, what do you need? Oh, well, I need the basic tools and fuel or whatever it is in whatever game to get started. And how do I do this anyway? So the needs and therefore solutions and roles have emerged. And once again, communities, meaning groups of people who have gathered around some shared value or interest or project idea, usually someone creates a concept and others gather because they know them from before, they find them, or they have some affinity to it. But then, that creator might create stories or lore or a game or NFTs or whatever it is they're doing on Earth, some virtual version, and bring people they know and others. And that continues to grow and build groups of communities and alliances and people that travel together in the metaverse. So I'm gonna, if we're proposing what to vote for, I'm gonna vote for communities and sharing of knowledge as the and training for AI as the models for the future in regard to training.
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Well, thank you so much for today's topic. It's one that, as we've spoken about before, is one that is dramatically changing how we see the training landscape. And really, if you begin to step back and look at the metaverse, it's still evolving very much, and it's beginning to come there. And we're about to see part of the metaverse as a way that they hope to change how we approach education, how we approach learning, how we approach group interactions, conferences, other things like that. And if you look today across the internet, across the media, there's a lot of buzz about the metaverse, and it's still trying to go forward with it. And as you look at the metaverse, it's fostered by 3D imaging, virtual avatars, artificial intelligence, machine learning, extended reality type of solutions. And it opens up a lot of new prospects for services and particularly e-learning in areas such as healthcare, fitness, manufacturing, big time in the military and education. And if you go back and look at some of the forecasts, for example, PwC forecasts that VR and AR software will influence more than 23 million jobs in the world, which really indicates the shift needs to go to the metaverse for training. And as other type of studies have come back, there are projections that the metaverse with AR and VR will be 4 times faster in learning as opposed to a conventional classroom setting. And some of the advantages for that are speed, convenience, really risk reduction, cost effectiveness, and improved performance. And there's just so many use cases that we can go through for training in the metaverse. But it's a shift that's underway, approaching rapidly. But one of the best applications as you look at the metaverse is to have metaverse involved not just with the graphical imagings on the screen, but you begin to look at how do I combine VR? How do I combine AR with it? How can I provide other types of AI enhanced learning? One of the best examples I've seen with a company that's headquartered here in Austin is they have done a metaverse play with VR, or with AR, to help people repair jet engines at airports around the world, where the technicians at those airports might not get into a jet engine, but once every many months apart. And you can see how this can be used to enhance that type of learning and discovery. And I actually got to, at an influencer meeting with that organization, got to go and play with that type of application, and on a real jet engine setup there, begin to do work. And God, I almost felt like I should go and become a jet engine mechanic after that. It was so easy. But you see those things, and I think that's as the metaverse matures, as we get a better understanding on how to integrate the real world with the metaverse, we will see it do nothing but increase. So really, thank you for this first part, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Oh, building on those comments, and there's a lot there to build on. I think I'll start with what Eric was got onto about what is training in the first place. And I'd like to give an analogy to sport, to the way that people train for sport. So let's take an example of a sport. Let's say it's football, like soccer. Soccer, like the world calls it football, Americans call it soccer. Let's say soccer is decentralized. Why do people train and how do people train? They train in their own way, and it begins with a sense of purpose to the thing. That understanding the purpose to the thing is really the center of gravity that the rest of training formulates around. And Eric he had mentioned both sides, both parameters of a aspect of business planning, of enterprise planning, where I'd like to describe a comic that I read recently. The comic depicts a job interview. There are two people sitting in a chair, one chair each, and that the interviewer asks, tell me why you want the job. And then the person being interviewed answers, I want the money. And the interviewer is a little surprised and says, wait, no, that's all you want? Like, I want somebody who's dedicated. And then the interviewee asks, well, tell me why you're hiring somebody. And the employer starts to answer, but stumbles over his own answer by saying, well, I need to make money. I need to make money. And then the interviewee answers, so we're equal then, right? What is this double standard of the employee needs to be dedicated and passionate, committed, and serving a purpose, but the employer has no commitment of the stripe. Their employees are just there to help the enterprise make money. Ultimately, business planning has to happen, right? Like labor needs an organizing element to follow. Oh, we have some background. That's not me. Who is that? Lisa's playing a sport in the background or something. I don't know. And it doesn't matter. I'll keep going.
I think the only other mic open is Sharif's.
Oh, it's just the noise there. Okay, fair enough. Sorry. I thought I was confused for a second there. So resource planning has to happen. Labor needs an organizing element to follow. I believe that the center of gravity truly is the passion and the purpose, because the reason for the myth exists for a reason. Workers show up and they're ready with that answer. The employer asks, why do you want this job? And they're like, because I believe in it. And that's where we start, really. And there's an aspect of right livelihood that I think that should inform people if they're building a community as compared to building a market. So there's a difference between building a market and being extractive to it, or building an enterprise and being extractive to its contributors, as in like it's labor, right? It's workers, it's workforce. I think that pursuing a right livelihood and understanding that the space is a benevolent space, like share the surplus. There are a lot of worthwhile projects and there are a lot of problems in the world that money can solve that help you build your network effect, and that do that like sport does. And just to bring my comments today back to the sport analogy, I would like to suggest the reason for sport runs parallel to the reason for enterprise, and that the actual reason for sport, the actual reason is to develop human potential. And that when a person is young and they're getting involved in a sport, that being involved in the sport will strengthen their body to being as strong as their body can be. It will distill their focus. It'll bring their mind to a place of focus in a way that there are multiple ways to do that, but this is just one that works, right? So it's fine. The idea is to develop character and discipline and the right balance of the temperament, right? To win on paper, whatever it is, whatever sport we're talking about, whether it's a team sport or an individual sport, to win on paper is actually secondary to the purpose of developing yourself to your full potential. And it's important to keep that in mind. And I think that business and enterprise planning can run a parallel with that, where on paper, it looks like the purpose of enterprise planning is to turn a profit and to maximize profit. Just like the sport seems like the purpose is to defeat your opponent. And that's the illusion. That's the illusion, because the actual purpose of enterprise planning is to is instill a virtuous cycle in the economy, a virtuous cycle of provisions that you've been a provisioner, and that has a moving effect around the cycle of trade that benefits you. It's not about enterprise planning shouldn't take on the problematic aspects of sports do, where people are pressured into a form of competitiveness that is outright bad for their own health and therefore counterproductive to the actual goal. And just as enterprise planning can collapse on itself by thinking that it's succeeding just because the numbers look good, it can get too top heavy, it can get too extractive, and they leave themselves vulnerable to a competitor who shows up and is equanimous. Just like most of the big enterprises are today that have so much public disdain for them that as soon as there's any competitor that is meaningfully viable, they'll get squashed unless they transform themselves, because the market won't follow them unless they have to. Just as in sport, people don't train for things because they really have to. Like it just has to be passion. It has to be true. And so those are my comments for now on this, on training the metaverse.
Thank you.
Oh, wait, one more thing about coaching. I'll save it for my next talk.
Okay. We will invite you in our business incubations, and you can train people. No problem. Mr. Eric. So naturally, I work, especially World Talent Economy Forums, work with one of the communities. We have a huge populations, like 300 million people. We have a lot of challenge. Still, we have problem with electricity, problem with internet, problem with pure waters, drinking waters, problem with transportation systems, and we try to integrate it, this metaverse and all of the advanced thing. How it will be benefit for this kind of communities? And my second question is that we see all of the big companies in Dhaka, but why don't this big company never touch the grassroots level people? And which is very important. What is the reason? Like Facebook, Metaverse, and why don't they uplift this community? What do you think? What we can do for them?
Well, I think Jason hit the nail on the head. Why do big companies want to do this? To make money. Okay. So the key is to put a big company together is very hard. First, you have to get it going, and putting the pieces and getting those pieces to work together is really, really hard. And the skill set that's valued most are people who can put those pieces together, keep them together, and keep them working. And the type of people that are really good at doing that tend to think in terms of ROI. In other words, show me a plan for every dollar we invest in this, what's the dollar coming back? And so the two challenges of that is if somebody comes and says, here's something we don't know how to do, let's do it anyway. Let's start. It's like, well, wait a minute, what's the ROI? You know, if we do this, give me exactly for every dollar. I said, I don't know. No one's done this before. So what is it? And the other thing is they tend to think in terms of big scale. And the example I'll use is microloans. Nobody ever thought that you would loan developing countries money at all. Why? Because what's the loan? The loan could be for $50 or $100 or a few $100. Like if you use Kiva platform, you can make loans all over the world for somebody that just wants to buy chickens or, you know, buy a vehicle to, you know, radically change their business. And so when big businesses look at this, they don't see the power in volume. Now, if you look at the Chinese with their BRI initiative, you know, the old Silk Road, they're actually realize the value of developing countries, and they're going out and moving it out and creating the infrastructure and all that, and they're inviting the mostly Chinese companies to come along with them. Like Alibaba is one of those. It's like, hey, as we do this, let's create internet businesses, not internet front ends to brick and mortar businesses. They're actually saying, let's create internet businesses and lifestyle and culture. So that's a case where a huge organization, China, is doing exactly what you said, trying to move it out to answer both questions. How do we deliver them electricity? And then how do we deliver them products and services on top of that? And I mean, Alibaba's done that in China. You hear these Taobao villages where in these remote areas, there's 50 or more groups have come and created their own internet businesses, that live and are meant and a change in lifestyle and culture that does that. So that's the primary reason is one, they don't see the immediate return, and two, they're not used to thinking that way, that, oh, they're thinking of, I do this, I get this big return, not big return comes from volume. It's kind of a foreign concept. But how do we do that? Well, again, it comes kind of like what everybody is saying here is the training part. The things that the World Talent Economic Forum can do is teach people to think of community and value differently. Just even if we didn't have electricity, if we just think of community and value differently, you could still trade in coffee, but you think, how do we produce the coffee? What's it for? What do you use coffee to? And what happens? Do I get a membership? Does that mean I get my next coffee free? Or does that mean if I do this, I get... So with no technology, the principles are still there. Now you add a little bit of technology, it gets better. But the big thing is, while VR and AI and AR, XR, all the virtual stuff, that does take... You can't do that without technology. But I used to operate on ships at sea, and we had almost no bandwidth. And it's amazing what you can get done if you create about it and think about it differently with these EHF radio frequencies, point to point. You can just spend little shots of data by pointing at each other. Or I was one of the first people in the organization to use chat. We actually had chat networks that connected ships and with the shore. So, and we were running highly technical things locally, but sharing that between each other, not much. And you think of Internet of Things. We were able to put small bits of information and communicate great value across connected and disconnected networks. So that's kind of, I think, the answer to your question is, one, why big companies don't do that. As you get big, they're not set up to do that. They don't see the value of numbers. How do you get around that? Well, you teach people to think differently, and you do it because who's the first one to jump on board when they see a market? Big companies. They'll ignore it. They'll ignore it. They'll ignore it. But the other thing about big companies is, we used to work with companies like Siemens and Northrop Grumman and things like that, and they couldn't even consider anything unless they put $1 million in it. For them to even think about it, man, I've got to reserve the prototyping team and the business analysts. And so if they decided to even look at something with their process, it was at least $1 million to even think about it. And in fact, I brought several companies. You don't need to think about it. Here's a sole source contract. They have what you already want. They're like, no, can't do it because we need to put $1 million to think about it. I said, yeah, to evaluate these things, you don't need to do. They had a very tough time doing that. But when they saw they want to win by understanding the market and planning. If they don't understand the market, they don't like it because you can't plan. And so they're the first ones to jump on board once somebody else demonstrates the value. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Madam Lisa.
All right, I'm going to use the community model as an example. Let's say you as an individual have just identified one of those needs, and I don't know if you want to pick one or have me make one up, but some might be harder than others. Let's go with something like you want to get people in the Philippines some resources. Let's say that's your goal, right? There's some people in the Philippines who might need housing, food, actually know of some people who have some pets who need some care right now, actually in the Philippines. But let's just say that you want to get some resources there, okay? So that you can say, okay, well, that's a nice lofty goal, and I can identify all sorts of big things that take a long time and need other people and need other money. Or you can get on Telegram and or Discord and reach out to some community managers of Philippines groups and say, hey, do you want to help in these other communities? I'll give you some tokens if you help. Here's how you play, right? And all of a sudden, in literally like a few conversations and whatever gameplay you're used to, transferring tokens, get rewarding with NFTs, click here, whatever, play this game and that, any number of ways you can really, in just a few clicks, get resources to someone. And then you can say, who else around you wants to do this? And all of a sudden, some of the projects that maybe you're working with in terms of like playing the game or being in the communities, if they do really well, all of a sudden those tokens have a lot more value than when you all were playing with them and sharing them originally. And now people can buy houses and create earthly stores and bring friends around who can benefit, and it starts to grow. So that's one example of how you can tackle a real world need. If you put too many things in the middle, it kind of makes it hard, I think, whether it's earthly or virtual, both being real, I suppose. So pick any topic you want to address and make a name for the community. Set up a Telegram, Twitter, or at least Discord, something like that, whatever your preference is for social media, and invite people to join and share ideas with how to tackle it. And others who have ideas about the tools of the metaverse, whether it's NFTs or virtual reality, eventually people will come around to help manifest that in those places as well and cause attention and growth toward that project. And as far as the big companies go, they definitely do get involved in this. Facebook has had a dramatic influence on the welfare of billions of people around the world. And I'm sure there's critics about aspects of what they've done that maybe have, that created issues, but the ability to create groups and stores and communicate with audiences of people in various ways, low cost advertising that works. There's a lot of things that Facebook, for example, has done to help people around the world, everywhere. So now with I'll say the advent of decentralization, to be cliche, I think we're able to create exponential value as community members, not needing to be in the big companies. However, the big companies will potentially have large audiences, affiliation customers of various ways, and can help support various endeavors, either creating platforms or spaces or rewards or various things. So I think their biggest barrier to entry, though, is regulation. Once regulation is clear, I would imagine the larger companies will feel more comfortable doing more.
And if people want to see what Lisa was talking about, they can go to internet.org. So really big platform companies like Facebook, Google have separate initiatives to actually expand their market by increasing infrastructure and working with teams to do that. So if you're big enough and you see that potential marketing, they do those kind of things you're talking about.
But Facebook does it just inherently in their business model. Early on, they created APIs so that groups could integrate their logins, the ability to create groups and pages, the ability to use the community tools in various ways, so that whatever you're doing, you could cause people to go there. It really was a innovative and revolutionary model for its time, which, of course, at massive scale has has had to deal with these issues that weren't apparent up front, right? But nevertheless, like, what an extraordinary experiment, and something we can use to continue to grow and evolve new ideas and the next generation ideas, much like Facebook Meta leadership is doing themselves. So they're, like, I think inherent in their business were solutions to the questions you're asking about. And so what does that look like in the future? Well, similar but different. And I think more and more, as people have experienced and learned, are going to lean toward decentralization and the power of the people. Because I mean, there's not even that many companies relative to increasing numbers of people as well, and you can't really expect them to do everything. I mean, we have to take some responsibility at the people level and let the companies do what they do, and we do what we do, and we'll have more power and tools than ever to do that.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
A very good discussion today, and I particularly enjoy hearing the discussion going back and forth about how this could be used in the enterprise, how it could be used in the different size companies and others like that. And I know it might be some of the companies I deal with and things, but I'm really beginning to see this used more and more in the large enterprises, and as we see it. I've seen some of the Fortune 50 firms begin to use the metaverse for onboarding training, where they're using them to train them on the company, the policies, the services, the products. And one of the things that's very interesting about this is these companies have set up virtual spaces where the new hires and their mentors and others can become familiarized with the culture, the ethics, and the others. And what they're finding, and what I've read about that and talked to some of them, is that it's reducing the training time. It's creating a more connection to the corporate culture and the others like that. As I mentioned before, we're seeing it used in skills training. And particularly as you look at it, one of the biggest costs in traditional skills training is materials and others. And that allows the metaverse really to allow learners to make mistakes without exhausting physical materials. And they're more likely to experiment. They're more likely to look at other things and save resources. And so the metaverse can be used for training, not only for technical training, but so soft skills as well. And some of the studies I've seen recently come out of university looking at metaverse training, it says it helps in nurturing important skills such as communications, teamwork, customer service, and particularly people-facing skills. And it enables them to have almost hands-on experience that really expedites the learning process and efficiency. Safety training, big one there. It lets the companies use this to engage the learners and provide practice, instant feedback. And as we begin to see the metaverse combined with a pure VR, AR type of environment, it really enhances the learning they can familiar with the threats and risk of the workforce. But while they're remaining perfectly safe and do it. Sales training, another great one where you see it, and particularly how the metaverse allows you to do story telling and others like that. And so as I look at it, and particularly again, combined with 3D technology, combined with virtual intelligence, augmented reality, combined with where we see, for example, conversational avatars that can listen and respond to what the trainees are asking for in real time, that is where you're going to see the big growth areas of this, because it gives you a learner-centered solution. And even the early metaverse environments are engaging, they're interactive, and there are places they can go without limitation of time or usage of materials. And it gives you a place, particularly as we look at the younger generations, they are much more likely to learn more in a metaverse environment than they are in an instructor-led environment, where some of the older generations will still prefer the instructor-led environment. It allows better decision making because you can provide more opportunities for your workforce and even for your customers to learn and to experiment with it. It ends it in a way that you become engaged. You get data back on it. It's really hard to extract a lot of data back from in-person learning, in-person training. But in the metaverse, you have so many different ways to capture data that as you capture more of this data, data will drive better outcomes. Data will drive better training. Data will drive actually better products based on what you can do in it. One of the impacts of COVID is we saw an expanded dimension of work at home and hybrid workplace now. And this whole metaverse approach of the corporate culture, the metaverse approach to training really addresses very well the hybrid workforce. And you begin to see it. The metaverse has the potential, and I'm going to use the potential because it's not there yet, to address all the existing challenges we see for remote working. It provides organization a means to use it, not just for corporate training, but department-centric training, large-scale events. It allows you one-on-one training within the metaverse or very big groups, such as conference-type training. It provides managers with a virtual environment where they can meet employees and communicate them and retain in-person interaction without the hassles of doing something like a Zoom call. And virtual space within it can be dedicated to different teams to collaborate to solve critical business problems. It can be used in a training model or a day-to-day work model on that. So yeah, I see some slight differences as this because of my focus more on the larger enterprise organizations and on the government and others. But I see just great potential, particularly as we understand better the impacts from COVID going forward and how this hybrid work environment is going to work. So Sharif, I think that's mine.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. I'll build on those. I think that I'm going to take a slightly different approach to the answer, though. And just so I can refresh the question, please, Dr. Sharif. You're asking why established enterprises, big corporations, don't cultivate community the way that we've been talking about. Is that correct? Or can you repeat the question for us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you are correct.
Okay. I just don't think that they're that type of animal. Let's talk about what real training is in life. In that we go to training events and we try to get skills. People go to develop their skills intentionally, like to a workshop or something like that, when they want to. Sometimes when they have to, but mostly when they want to. There's a big difference between when they want to and when they have to. And the truth is you can't force feed anybody to learn anything. If a person wants to develop themselves, let's go back to the analogy of sport. If a person wants to learn how to be a better soccer player, then they will be dreaming about it all day. Like they will be thinking about it. They'll be replaying their steps in their mind. They will be developing themselves literally in their dreams to become a better participant in that thing that they're passionate about. And that there are social cues that people pick up about what gets respect and what gets dismissed, or what gets friction, or what gets flack, and everything in between. And that corporations that maximize their profit margin at the expense of all other priorities. Their very first priority is the maximization of profit on paper, and then every other priority is second. That includes their priority of cultivating community. And I would suggest that for most of the established large corporations, their priority of cultivating community isn't even in the top 100 because it's just not that kind of animal. Okay, so let's talk about real competition, not sports. Let's talk about ecosystem competition. Like, how do sharks and octopi compete? You would think in a direct competition that they don't. And you would think that in a direct competition that maybe like a shark is much more ferocious, and so like an octopus is just too soft. But is there even a competitive vector there? But in reality, there is a competitive vector there because they are competing for food. They are competing for space. They're competing for niche. They send each other a million little social cues every day about, hey, I'm here, splash off or something. Or, hey, I'm here and you can do something, like I need your teeth. You do that thing and then I'll do something back for you. They either compete or they cooperate in the ecosystem, and it's not fixed. One day they compete, the next day they cooperate. But they do compete for food, and that companies compete for attention. Attention is the food in this industry of where are the clicks going, where the clicks following, what is the screen time observing, and what are people dreaming about next, and what it's trying to do next. And that the companies that we're talking about, the established ones, they're like sharks, and they're just gonna keep being sharks. Maybe they can transform, right? Maybe they have a transformation imminent, because the ecosystem analogy only goes so far, right? What we're talking about in reality are organizations that we're using some poetic license to say like you're a shark and you're an octopus, but they're not, right? They could transform, but what I'm saying is in their current structure, they can't do that. Unless they see a competitive advantage to that structure, to that form of operating. I don't know. I hope that answers the question. I think I'd like to say that. Also about coaching. Yeah, I forgot to mention my point. A lot of coaches train their athletes using exercise as the punishment. Like when the team performs poorly or the athlete performs poorly, at a competition, then the very next practice is just torture. Okay, I've had coaches like that. I think everybody's who's been a competitive athlete has had coaches like that who will drill you so hard with the exercise as like the reinforcement for like as if your will to compete wasn't good enough or something. And that creates a psychological connection to exercise that is just like the antithesis of where to be at, in that strengthening your body and training should be a joyful experience. And this is an analogy that pertains to the metaverse. So I'll get there. Strengthening your body and training should be something that you do with joy. You should run with joy in your heart. Like, to run is a joy. Think about it that way. To run is a joy. To play is a joy. To compete can be a joy. To develop yourself in this way can be a joy. When coaches get the toxic attitude of, oh, you didn't get the win on paper, therefore there's no more joy, then we're not here for joy anymore, right? You're going to do push-ups until you puke or something. That is really bad coaching mentality, but it's not even their fault because they were raised the same way too, and they think that it worked for them. If you ask a person who was raised that way, are you a good person? They'll probably answer back, yeah, I'm a great person. I turned out great. My life was shit. Everyone kicked my ass, right? It was super harsh and totally unfair, and that's what made me hard and strong and good. Therefore, in order to make the future hard and strong and good like me, I just have to be as hard on them as the world was on me. And that's their logic, which is egocentric. It's not even their fault. The coaches often got the wrong lesson about how to coach as well. And industry training can take a cue from that. For industry training, the process of developing yourself as a professional is actually what industry needs to know is that people actually dream about this shit. People actually want to perform well in their career and have success, and that you have to tap into that desire instead of being the coach who sits you down and is like, okay, we're going to make this like torture now. Be disciplined and obedient. That training is not going to fly, right? If you're doing something for the metaverse, think of it like a coach. Think of like the joy of running and go parallel with that.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
But just to address Jason's comment about the profit motive, around in the 90s, Kaplan and Norton realized that the best performing companies in the world were ones that really worried about finance, but worried about equally other things. And that include, finance is what do our shareholders think about us, but they also figured out how to ask questions and measure that into their core business. So what do our customers think about it? How do we create value, our operations, and how do we continue learning and growth for the future? So that's called the balanced scorecard. So companies that use that think more along the line of it's not just about the money. And I think more and more companies are doing that. That's good. Well, so in concluding, we talked about why we want to train. David, of course, brought up the idea of the typical things: efficiency, time, labor, all those kind of things. Lisa and Jason talked about, well, yes, but here's how you make money. Here's how you create value. Here's how you do things like that. So that's why we train in the metaverse. Then we talked about a little bit more about how we train. We do that by teaching people how to connect, how to share value, how to define value, how to move things, how to call and get things done, which Lisa is very good at. Just let's do it. They don't have to be big. They can be small. That's, that's how we train people to do that. But, what is training? And the real key is when we talk about what is training and how to do that, the metaverse can make big difference. So the first question we ask ourselves as professional trainers, those of us that are, is do we do pre-recorded or live? Pre-recorded or live? Is it something that we record and then I'm not there, or we're live? And the answer is, yeah, it depends. And you can do both. And then the metaverse changed the idea of what is pre-recorded and what is live. Pre-recorded, for example, is what if I go and there's a bunch of AIs interacting with me? So I'm not just watching something. Is that pre-recorded? Because we did it and nobody's there. That's a person, but it doesn't feel pre-recorded because it's different every time. So, well, okay, pre-record live. The second question is this on demand, mean I can do it in my own time, or do I do it in synchronize with the other parts? That's the second question is, on demand, or do we do it together as at the same time, synchronous or asynchronous? And then the real difference is, do I do this by myself or do I do this with a community? Is community important? And the key is community, and the metaverse, the idea of community can change and create really in big ways. And probably the last question is, do I do this online or do we have to get together in person? And again, the metaverse changes what in person looks like and what online looks like. They kind of blend those kind of things. So that's my concluding remarks. Is we've talked a bit about the why and the how, but I think the metaverse can change our definition of what that training looks like in ways that we haven't even begun to imagine yet.
Thank you, Madam. Lisa, what's your concluding remarks?
I think whether you're an individual or representing or involved in a group or in a company of any size, the concept of what is it you're trying to accomplish applies. And if you think about that and think, well, what information do I want to share? What information do I want to gather? Who would be interested in this because we have similar ideas or shared goals? And inviting those people to become involved, that applies at all levels and size and scale. Some technology applies. It's all going to be adapted depending on size, scale, like where it is in the stage of growth of that community or company or what have you. But I encourage everyone who is interested in exploring the metaverse, think about, like, what would you do if you could do anything? If you could literally do anything, and whether that's like giving back to people on Earth or exploring concepts like building a spaceship or, and really anything, because the metaverse really is a simulation. It's our imagination with some extension to it. And so training is really just communicating. And I think it often is used by companies or at large scale, when they think people need to be programmed with a set of information and trained, much like we're saying, robots now need to be trained, AI robots need to be trained with knowledge layers. So, but, keep in mind the higher picture, especially as there are less and less levels in society and we're each able to access better technology and internet and resources, tech, software, hardware, or whatever we need. You know, what is it we would want to get done for ourselves, our groups, our companies, and think about now how we could experiment and explore that and talk to others around and brainstorm. For one, it's enjoyable and it's really fun to have hope. like hope is a good thing, and you get to meet wonderful people like those on this call, and possibly and actually likely over time do things that impact people like you would want.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
The opinions have been great on today's program, Sharif, and I am once again honored to be involved with people like you have on your show today. The metaverse will have a big impact, particularly as you begin seeing large organizations even changing their names of the corporate entities to reflect the fact that the metaverse is coming here. We're seeing increased engagement all the time. We're seeing now conferences and large conferences beginning to set up a parallel metaverse to complement the physical conference that's going on, particularly as many people are still reluctant to go and travel into large groups. And that's going to be a driver going forward. For your developing nation, Sharif, I'm seeing metaverse beginning to be used in even developing nations as a way to provide services going back to their citizens. And training surely can be part of that services initiative as well, going back to the citizens. So I see many applications here, many opportunities for entrepreneurships to jump on the bandwagon with this and provide services, particularly to small and medium-sized businesses where this can be a game changer because of the expense of resources required for in-person training and for career development and advancement. I think it will have large opportunities in that as we look at the fact that we're in a time of lifelong learning. And how do you take new ways to extend and enhance your lifelong learning? So I see many opportunities, Sharif, but thank you for letting me be part of this panel again today.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like it was a great way to start out the day for myself, and feeling honored to be part of this group, sharing thoughts with this group, and that it helps me understand better too when people ask the questions or people are exploring the topic, because it's not like I have this all written out that I already know these answers. And that I learned so much from everybody here along the way so far, and even including today. So for that, I'll just say thank you and look forward to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. This is really great discussions, and I just want to share a good news. World Talent Economy Forum, we are working with Harvard Business School, especially we are developing case study from developing world. You know that I always say that especially in the business studies, we read a lot, we study a lot about developed nations, corporations, business, and many more things, bank, and many things. So this time we approached to Harvard University. Why don't we bring the story of the developing nations, because we have our own story. We have many largest corporations, they have different story. Maybe this way we can enhance the capacity of the business world, and we can know from each others. So Harvard University, especially Professor Karin, I want to give you special thanks. She give us opportunity to develop the case study from the developing nations. So I'm really happy, and my team really happy, and those who want to contribute, those who want to develop the case study from the developing world, they can work with us. So hopefully it will be published in the Harvard University case study, and your contributions will be helpful for developing knowledge-oriented society. Thank you, dear audience, those who continuously support World Talent Economy Forum, and especially especially our honorable speakers, those who join in World Talent Economy Forum. I can ensure you the World Talent Economy Forum, how it create impact from Prime Minister Office of the developing worlds, different developing nations, to different ministries, to different largest corporations and largest university. Everybody joining in World Talent Economy Forum. We are developing a lot of lab, many good organization, good community. They are supporting, they are integrating with us. So your contribution will be part of history. That's for I'm sure. Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for your continuous support, and the audience, those who support World Talent Economy Forum. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care. Excellent session.